Oh boy. Well, I really struggled to find the record button just then. Also, my hair is a mess, just ignore it. I do need a haircut, I know, you don't have to tell me. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Morning Bible. Wonderful, as per usual, to have you. We are very near the end, you know. We are into Luke chapter 4, which is the final chapter of Luke. So I reckon there's only 3 or 4 more videos left to go. So you'll remember last time, Jesus' body has been laid in the tomb. He went into the tomb of a man called Joseph. He was a rich guy, which fulfilled prophecy from sort of way back in Isaiah, talking about Jesus lying, or the coming king will lie with the dead, not with the dead, with the rich. And so that fulfilled that prophecy. Jesus is in the tomb. All of his disciples have kind of gone home, and there were some women. So we'll just pick up on what it was at the end of the last video. It says, "The women who had come with him from Galilee followed and saw the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. On the Sabbath day they rested according to the commandment." So Jesus was put in the tomb on a Friday, and so the women go with Jesus, or like the people putting him in the tomb, they go with them to see where the body is, and then they return home to prepare kind of spices and oils and things that they would put on the body. It was kind of a common practice to do that. But the next day was the Sabbath day. It was kind of a Saturday to us, the final day of their week. And so they weren't allowed to do any work on that day. They followed God's commands, and so they didn't work for the Sabbath day. And then the next day is the Sunday, which is when they're finally able to return, which is what we're going to see here. It says, "But on the first day of the week," so that's a Sunday, "at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared. And they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus." So the women go to this tomb. It would have had a big stone in front of it, a big stone that was rolled in front, too heavy for any person to kind of move on their own. It would take a large group of people to be able to move this stone. And you wouldn't be able to move it from the inside. It would only be able to be moved kind of from the outside. So, you know, there's this stone that's been put there that's too heavy for anyone to move. But yet this stone isn't there. It's been moved out of the way somehow. It isn't there. And so they go in and they find that the body isn't there. And it says, "While they were perplexed about this, behold, 2 men stood by them in dazzling apparel. And as they were frightened and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, 'Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified and on the 3rd day rise.' And they remembered his words." So they find 2 men sort of standing in this tomb. This passage doesn't refer to them as angels, but the sort of common perception of them is that these 2 men were angels that were sent from God. It says they were dressed in dazzling apparel. That's something you see quite often associated with angels. And they were frightening. So we see that these women are frightened at the sight of these men. These 2 men who are in the tomb. That's a common reaction to angels. That's something you see a lot. It's how Mary was at the beginning. You remember when the angel Gabriel came to speak to her, he said, "Do not be afraid." And it's how most people kind of interact with an angel. There's an element of fear because you see something kind of frightening. There's something frightening about an angel. And so that kind of tells us who they are. And then I think it's the message that they bring that is especially relevant, sort of understanding the fact they're angels. It says, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" So these angels are essentially breaking the news. It's like, look, Jesus isn't here. He's not among the dead. He's among the living. He isn't in this graveyard. He isn't in a tomb. He is out there. He is risen again. He is back. He isn't dead. And the angel reminds them, he says, "Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, be crucified, and on the 3rd day rise." So the angel here is talking about all of the prophecies that Jesus gave sort of throughout his whole time, his whole ministry. He did it, I think, 3 times. He said, "Look, I'm going to be put into the hands of sinful men. I'm going to be crucified. I'm going to die, but on the 3rd day I'm going to come back again." And so this is the 3rd day, that Sunday. But the disciples, each time Jesus had given that prophecy to them, they hadn't understood what he was talking about. They didn't know what he meant. And so that's where the angel was reminding them of this here. They're like, look, you didn't understand it at the time, but you're going to understand it in a sec. You're understanding it now. Jesus isn't among the dead. Jesus is among the living. So that's the message the angel brings them. And the women remembered Jesus' words. So it comes back to them. They go, oh, of course, he did say that. And so the fact that these women remember shows that they had that belief right there, because they remember that Jesus said this. So there's an element of them going, hang on, Jesus is risen again. And so what do? Well, from verse 9 it says, and returning from the tomb, they told these things to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James and the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. So it says they returned to the 11. So you remember Jesus, whenever he went round, he had 12 disciples with him. There are now 11 disciples. The implication there is that Judas is no longer among them. Judas, after he betrayed Jesus, has stopped being one of the 12 disciples. And so when the women returned to the disciples, there are 11 of them rather than the usual 12. But there are also all the other followers. It says, and to all the rest. And so the notes in my Bible say that to the rest includes some of the... where is it? There we go. All the rest includes the 2 disciples of Luke 24:13-25, so that's this next bit that we're going to read tomorrow, and the 120 of Acts, chapter 1:15. So Acts comes later on in its book, later written, but it follows on pretty much directly from the end of the book of Luke. And that talks about there being 120 there. So there's quite a large group of people. But there's a large group of women as well that are sort of making this case. You've got Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women. So you have a large group of women who are making this case to all these apostles. And so what's their reaction? It says, but these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. So these women come and they say, look, we've been to the tomb, the body's missing, the stone's been rolled away. We saw an angel, we saw 2 angels, and they told us that Jesus is risen. And it's that prophecy that Jesus kept saying, and these women are trying to convince these followers of Jesus. They're trying to sort of remind them, trying to get them to kind of wake up and believe. But all these people, I mean, it's understandable, to be fair, their friend's been killed, and they don't kind of have that much of a concept of being raised from the dead. There was Lazarus, who Jesus raised from the dead before, but Jesus dying, they can't understand how Jesus could die and come back, and so they're like, they don't want to believe it as much as they can't, bring themselves to believe it anyway. And so these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter rose and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen clothes by themselves, and he went home marvelling at what had happened. So Peter alone out of this group of disciples, gets up and he runs to this tomb and he says, I'm going to go and see this for myself. And these women have told me something, I don't know whether to believe it or not, so I'm just going to go. And so Peter gets up and he runs to this tomb. And the fact that he runs shows that kind of, there's a level of belief there. He isn't doing this like, okay, I'm going to go and just make sure, just prove these women wrong. No, he wants to believe this. He wants to have this faith, and so he gets up and he runs. And bear in mind, this is the same Peter who, just a couple of passages ago, was denying Jesus 3 times. He was saying, "No, I don't know that man. I've never followed that man. I don't know who he is. I don't want anything to do with him." And now Peter is coming back to Jesus. He's running back to this tomb to see what's happened. And when he gets there, he saw that the linen clothes are lying by themselves. So the things that the things that Jesus would have been wrapped with, the body would have been wrapped with, are just lying there empty. And so Peter goes into this tomb and he sees for himself, hang on, Jesus' body isn't here. And then he went home marvelling at what had happened. So he goes home and he doesn't know sort of what to say, what to think. So that's kind of today's passage. One of the things I think that's stuck out for me is the fact that all these disciples have stayed together. I think that's quite a powerful kind of testament for the way that having this faith in Jesus unites people. Because even though they think Jesus is gone, even though they're in mourning, all these things, they stay together as a group. These are people from all different towns, from all different villages, who wouldn't have known each other before this. But they come together in this crowd, follow Jesus. But when Jesus dies, this crowd doesn't just disperse and everyone sort of goes home and packs up and says, well, that's it. They stay together as a group. They sort of continue to have this unity. These 11 disciples continue together, and these women stay together. There's 120 people, they will stay. And it just shows kind of that even in sort of all this despair, all this loss, when they think Jesus is gone and they think there's no hope left, they all stick together, and they all have this community and this unity binding them, even though they're kind of different from different areas, they're different kinds of people, different ages, different genders. They stay together because of Jesus, because of this relationship they have with him. And that's something that you see modelled in the church today, and something that, you know, if you're in a good church, then you can see that by the unity that these people have, even across these divides that they have. But that's today's passage. The body of Jesus is missing. Having been put in the tomb in the last passage, it's missing in this one. And so tomorrow we're going to jump into a nice long passage, and we're going to see what happens next. Spoiler alert, Jesus is going to make a return. But I'll leave that for tomorrow's video. Until then, I hope you will have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Much love. Bye bye bye.